Why would a widow pay 32 men to fail? Eleanor Vance stood at her kitchen table that November morning, counting out $1,600 in small bills, $50 for every cowboy who'd tried to ride the black stallion, $50 for every broken rib, shattered pride, and public humiliation. She needed $2,000 to save her ranch, had 90 days to find it. The challenge offered $500 to any man who succeeded. But Eleanor knew something those 32 cowboys didn't. The test wasn't about riding. It was about understanding that some things can't be conquered. Then a stranger walked into her valley, carrying nothing but a worn photograph and the kind of patience that only comes from burying the people you love. What happened next would prove that broken things, horses, people, widows, drifters, can choose to trust again if they're brave enough. James Morton rode in front of his small entourage, 23 years old, all swagger and smooth hands that had never known real work. His brothers flanked him like an honor guard, protecting royalty. Behind them rode ranch hands and curious townspeople from Copper Ridge. People always loved watching other people fail spectacularly. James swung down from his horse with practiced, showy ease, tipped his expensive hat toward Eleanor with exaggerated courtesy. "Mrs. Vance," he said smoothly. "Mr. Morton," she replied without any warmth. "I'm here to try your challenge today. $50 to attempt, $500 and ownership if you succeed. I understand the terms completely. Do you understand the horse?" Eleanor asked pointedly. James glanced at Obsidian across the cold yard. The stallion stood motionless at the far fence watching, measuring the newcomer with those intelligent black eyes. "I've broken 40 horses, Mrs. Vance. I know exactly what I'm doing." Talker. Eleanor had heard those exact words 32 times before. "The gate's open when you're ready to begin." James handed his hat to one of his watching brothers. He rolled his shoulders like a prize fighter preparing. The crowd pressed closer to the fence rail, eagerly. Someone was already taking bets on how long he'd last. Eleanor heard the murmur of odds and calculations, the clink of coins changing hands in the cold. She watched James enter the corral with false confidence. She watched Obsidian's ears pin flat against his head. She watched the space between man and horse shrink fast. 30 yards to 20 to 10 in seconds. Then the stallion exploded into sudden, violent motion, not attacking the challenger at all, just establishing boundaries with brutal clarity. He charged forward exactly 3 powerful strides. Then he wheeled hard and kicked out viciously, both hind legs snapping like whips through cold air. James stumbled backward in shock and nearly fell hard. Laughter rippled through the watching crowd like wildfire. James's face flushed dark red with humiliation and anger. Pride wounded far worse than his body would be. He tried a different angle of approach now, moving with more caution but no more understanding, because caution wasn't the same as understanding at all. Obsidian could sense the crucial difference immediately. Every time James got close, the horse evaded him, made him look foolish and clumsy, made him work hard for every foot gained. 20 minutes passed in this futile dance. James's confidence crumbled by slow degrees into frustration. Sweat darkened his shirt despite the November cold. His movements got sharper and more aggressive with each failure. Frustration made him sloppy in his technique. Sloppiness made him completely predictable to the horse. When he finally managed to loop the rope around Obsidian's neck, Eleanor almost felt sorry for the boy. The stallion reared high, and James held on desperately. For one brief moment he thought he'd won something. Then Obsidian came down hard with earth-shaking force. He pivoted smoothly, and the rope slid free instantly, like water flowing through open fingers. James stood there gasping, staring at the horse. Something very close to pure hatred burned in his eyes. "That's enough," Eleanor called out firmly. "I'm not done yet," James snapped back. "Yes, you are done. Right now." Eleanor's voice cut through the crowd noise like a blade. James's older brother stepped forward from the watching group. Daniel Morton, named after Eleanor's late husband and Patricia's idea of tribute. "Come on, James. She's right about this. Let it go now." The younger Morton threw the rope down in disgust. He stalked out of the corral past Eleanor. He didn't look at her even once. Just dug into his pocket and threw money hard. The bills scattered at Miguel's feet like worthless trash. Then he mounted his horse and rode off fast. His brothers and entourage followed close behind. The crowd began dispersing immediately, already telling exaggerated stories. Eleanor stood at the fence until the last one disappeared, until the dust settled back onto the frozen ground. 1650, Miguel said quietly. He bent to pick up the scattered bills carefully. Eleanor took the money and added it mentally. Still needed $350 more. Still had 87 days left to find it somehow. Still had no idea how to save this place. She turned to look at Obsidian one more time. The stallion had settled back into his usual corner. The entire confrontation was already forgotten or filed away. Just another human who'd tried force instead of patience. You're going to run out of fools eventually, Miguel observed. Eleanor thought about the bank letter in her lockbox, about her father's old ledger with its entries, about near bankruptcy and pride and choosing to stay. Not in this valley, she said. 2 days later, Caleb Rohr stood before the Nosotros board. The wood was weathered and covered with old announcements. He read the challenge carefully for the third time. Cowling, ride the unridables Obsidian, Eleanor Vance's black stallion. Success earns $500 in ownership. Failure costs $50. Vance Ranch, west of Copper Ridge. The paper was old and curling at the edges. Someone had tried to tear it down before. The tape holding it up looked fresh and new. Eleanor Vance kept replacing it faithfully. Caleb had exactly $63 to his name. $13 for food to survive. $50 for the challenge. That was everything he owned after 8 years drifting. He pulled the notice down carefully. He folded it with slow precision. Then he tucked it into his coat pocket. The general store sold him jerky and hardtack, coffee that would taste like dirt but keep him alive. $6 total for survival supplies. The livery rented him a decent horse for $7 more. That left exactly $50 in his pocket, enough for one single chance at redemption. The ride to the Vance Ranch took 3 cold hours. Caleb used the time to study the valley carefully. Old habits from the war years. Note the high ground for defensive positions. Find the water sources for survival. Understand the lay of the land completely. This was good land. He could see that clearly. Fertile soil, protected by ridges on 3 sides. A creek running clean through the middle ground. A man could build something real here, or a woman could keep building what family started. The ranch came into view as afternoon sun slanted low. 2-story house with a wraparound porch, barn and corrals, and several small outbuildings, everything showing wear, but nothing actually falling down yet. The kind of place that said, struggling but still standing. Caleb didn't ride straight to the corral immediately. Instead, he dismounted at the porch steps. He climbed them slowly. Then he knocked on the door politely. Eleanor Vance answered after the 3rd knock. She looked exactly like someone who'd run a ranch alone. For 3 hard years, weathered but strong, guarded but capable. 45 maybe. Though hard work added years, ma'am, Caleb said. He removed his hat respectfully. I'm here about your challenge, but I'd like your permission first. Eleanor blinked in clear surprise. Permission? For what exactly? Before I approach your horse. He's not mine to approach without it. And neither is your property. A long silence stretched between them. Eleanor studied him with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took in his worn clothes carefully, the scars on his weathered hands, the way he stood still and patient. Most men don't ask for permission, she finally said. Most men fail, Caleb replied simply. The corner of her mouth might have twitched slightly. Hard to tell for certain. What's your name? She asked. Caleb Rohr. Ma'am, where are you from, Mr. Rohr? Nowhere in particular. Everywhere in general, I suppose. A drifter, then. Yes, ma'am. That's accurate. Eleanor stepped out onto the porch. Fully. She pulled the door shut behind her firmly. You got $50? She asked, directly. I do. You understand you're probably going to lose it? I understand. That's what everyone thinks will happen. She looked at him for another long moment. Her expression gave nothing away. Then she nodded toward the corral. Gates that way. You have my permission now. Caleb expected her to follow him out there, but she didn't move. Just stood on the porch and watched. He walked his rented horse to the barn slowly. An older man appeared from inside the shadowed doorway, brown skin weathered like old leather from years outdoors, eyes that had seen everything twice over. "You the next challenger?" the man asked. "I suppose I am," Caleb replied. "Miguel Reyes. Foreman here." Caleb roared. They shook hands firmly. Miguel's grip was strong and honest and calloused. "You planning to try riding him today?" he asked. "No, sir. Today I'm just going to watch. Get to know what I'm dealing with first." Miguel's eyebrows rose noticeably. "That's different from the others, is it? Every other fool who came here went straight for rope and saddle. You're the first one who wanted to look first." Caleb turned toward the corral and studied it carefully. The black stallion stood at the far end watching. Even from this distance, Caleb could see the intelligence, the wariness and deep grief in those dark eyes. "How long did Mrs. Vance's husband work with him?" Caleb asked. "Year and a half, give or take." "And how long has he been like this?" 3 years now, since Daniel died in the fall." Caleb nodded slowly with understanding. "Then 1 day of watching won't tell me enough. But it's a start at least." He walked to the corral fence carefully. He settled against it with both arms folded, didn't enter the space, didn't call out, just stood there quietly, watching and learning. Obsidian watched back with equal intensity. An hour passed in stillness, then 2 hours. The sun moved steadily across the winter sky. Shadows lengthened across the frozen ground. Caleb didn't move except to shift weight occasionally. The horse paced, grazed on sparse grass, drank from the trough, tested invisible boundaries, measured safe distances constantly. Eleanor appeared around 3 o'clock with food. She carried a sandwich and a canteen. "You planning to stand there all day?" she asked. "That's what it takes," Caleb replied. "To do what exactly?" "To let him get used to me being here." She handed him the food without comment. He took it with a grateful nod. She didn't leave immediately this time. She stood beside him at the fence instead, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain distance. "Why do you want to ride him?" Eleanor asked. Caleb thought about the photograph in his pocket, Sarah's kind face and Annie's gap-toothed smile forever frozen, the life he'd lost 8 years ago completely. "Because nobody else can," he said finally, "and because something about that horse reminds me of something." "What's that?" He didn't answer right away at all, just kept watching Obsidian pace and think. "Proof," he said eventually, "that broken things can still choose to trust again." Eleanor went very still beside him suddenly. When Caleb glanced at her, something had shifted, something raw and quickly hidden again. "Your husband," Caleb said carefully. "How did he do it? What was his approach?" Eleanor was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then patience, presence, time spent together. She paused. "Daniel used to sit in that corral for hours, not doing anything at all, just being there near him. Let the horse observe him without pressure, get used to him gradually, understand he wasn't a threat." "How long before he touched him?" Caleb asked. 3 weeks, Eleanor replied. Caleb nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me that. Why does it matter?" "Because forcing this will fail completely. I don't come to things to fail anymore." Eleanor looked at him then, really looked at him, trying to read what was written there, in his face and scars and careful stillness. "There's a creek about a quarter-mile south. Do you want to camp?" "Good clean water there. I appreciate it," Caleb said. She walked back to the house alone. Caleb watched her go. Then he returned his attention to the stallion. Obsidian had moved closer during their conversation, not much closer, maybe 5 feet total, but it was movement toward instead of away progress, however small. The sun set slowly in shades of orange. Miguel brought out a lantern without being asked. He hung it on the fence post carefully. "She's letting you stay on the property," he observed. "Seems so," Caleb agreed. "You must have said something right to her." Miguel studied him in the flickering lamplight. "Fair warning, friend. If you're running some kind of con here, planning to hurt that horse or take advantage, you'll answer to me personally." "No con," Caleb said quietly. "Just a man trying to do something difficult without making it worse than it already is." Miguel held his gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "There's tools in the barn if needed. Eleanor won't say it out loud, but she could use the help here. Place is too big for 2 people alone. I'll keep that in mind, Caleb said. After Miguel left, Caleb stayed at the fence. He stayed until full dark came completely. Obsidian was just a shadow now, visible only when he moved against distant stars. But Caleb could feel him there still, watching, waiting, deciding something important. Finally, Caleb gathered his few belongings carefully. He walked to the creek in darkness, found a good spot to make camp, built a small fire for warmth and coffee. He pulled out the photograph and looked at it. Sarah and Annie smiled up at him forever, frozen in a moment before fever took them, before everything ended in one terrible week. I don't know if this is right, he said, to their faces and the empty night. Don't know if I'm supposed to stay anywhere. Don't know if I deserve to try again. The fire crackled. The creek whispered. The photograph offered no answers at all. Caleb tucked it away in his coat. He lay down under stars that didn't care. Tomorrow he'd come back to that fence again, and the day after that, and however many days it took, for a horse to decide whether trust was possible. Eleanor sat alone in her kitchen that night. A glass of whiskey sat before her untouched. The lockbox lay open on the worn table. The bank letter stared at her accusingly. 90 days, $2,000. Impossible, unless the challenge actually paid off. Unless someone finally understood what she was asking. As she pushed the letter aside with one finger, she pulled out her father's old ledger instead. The leather cover was worn smooth by decades. By her father's hands, then Daniel's, now hers. She opened it to a page near the middle. November 15, 1846. Nearly surrendered today. Her father's handwriting was careful and precise. John Patterson offered $800 for the land. Would solve everything immediately. Could move to town. Find easier work. Stop fighting this ground. But then I watched Margaret hang laundry today. Watched her look at this valley, like it was Eden itself. And I remembered something important. My daughter watches how I face defeat. What kind of man gives up easily? Staying is braver than leaving, even when staying hurts. Eleanor traced her father's handwriting with one finger. He'd nearly lost this place entirely, had come within a signature of selling everything. But he'd chosen to stay and fight instead, to build something worth passing down to family, and she was about to lose it anyway. She closed the ledger carefully. She reached for the last item. Daniel's journal lay at the bottom. Brown leather, pages yellowed and soft from handling. She'd read every word 100 times before. Knew them by heart completely. But tonight she needed to see his handwriting. Needed proof he'd been real once. The journal fell open to an entry naturally. 3 years and 2 months old now. 2 months before he died on that ridge. Worked with obsidian on the ridge trail today. Daniel's words were steady and sure. He's finally trusting enough to handle difficult terrain. 2 years to get here. 2 years of patience, of waiting and proving myself worthy. Eleanor thinks I'm crazy to spend so much time on one horse. She doesn't understand what I'm really doing. I'm not just training him to be ridden. I'm proving that trust can be rebuilt after it's broken. That connection matters more than control. That the hard way is sometimes the only way. I hope when I'm gone, someone will remember this. Will understand that healing can't be rushed. That patience is its own kind of courage. That choosing to trust again after being hurt is the bravest thing any living creature can do. Eleanor's vision blurred with sudden tears. She set down the journal carefully. She pressed the heels of her hands hard against her eyes. 3 years gone, 3 years, and she could still hear him. Could still see him sitting here, writing by lamplight after long days. Could still remember the morning Miguel rode up, with blood on an empty saddle. The memory came whether she wanted it or not. It was a Tuesday morning, clear sky overhead. She was hanging laundry on the line. Heard hoofbeats and looked up expecting Daniel home. Saw obsidian instead, riderless. Reins trailing in the dirt, blood on the saddle bright and terrible. Miguel had ridden out immediately to search. Found Daniel at the base of the ridge, broken neck, dead before he hit the ground. The horse had spooked at something small, a rock slide or a snake, something that turned into catastrophe. They'd buried Daniel on the ranch itself, under the cottonwood by the creek. Eleanor had stood at the grave and felt something inside her die with him. Not love. Love didn't die that easily. but hope, the belief that good things could last. After the funeral, she'd gone to the barn, found Obsidian in his stall, trembling badly. There was blood on him, too. Not his own. Daniel's blood. The horse had tried to come back, tried to get help somehow, but it was too late for help. Eleanor had reached for him gently. Obsidian had lunged at her, teeth bared, eyes wild with grief and terror. Nearly bit her hand off. She'd jerked back just in time. That's when she understood the truth clearly. The horse wasn't wild at all. He was grieving deeply, and grief made everything dangerous for everyone. A sound at the window made her look up. Miguel stood on the porch, hat in his weathered hands, hesitant to knock. She opened the door for him. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Saw your light on," he replied. He gestured at the whiskey. "Got another glass?" She poured him 2 fingers of amber liquid. They sat at the table in comfortable silence. 20 years of working together meant they didn't always need words. Finally, Miguel spoke quietly. "That drifter. He's different from the others." "How so?" Eleanor asked. "He didn't try anything today. Just watched. Asked questions about Daniel's method. Thanked you for the information. Like it was a gift." Eleanor thought about Caleb Rohr's scarred face, about what he'd said. Proof that broken things can still choose to trust. "He's looking for something," she said. "Aren't we all?" Miguel replied. Day 3 arrived, cold and clear. Caleb entered the corral for the first time. He didn't bring rope or halter or any tools, just himself and his quiet presence. He walked to the center of the space, 15 feet from the fence. Then he sat down in the dirt. Obsidian froze completely, every muscle tensed like coiled springs. The horse had been grazing at the far end. Now his head came up sharply, ears pinned flat against his skull, eyes locked on the intruder with total focus. Caleb didn't move at all, didn't look directly at the stallion, just sat with his legs crossed, hands loose in his lap, breathing steady and slow. 5 minutes passed in complete stillness. Obsidian didn't approach, didn't flee, just stood there, body poised for flight, waiting to see what this human would do. Caleb started talking in a low voice. "I knew a horse like you once." His words were steady and calm. "A buckskin gelding named Whiskey. Mean as hell when I first met him." The words weren't for communication. Horses didn't understand English, but they understood tone. The sound of a calm voice could become associated with safety. Obsidian's ears swiveled toward the sound. His body stayed tense and ready. Previous owner had beaten him for being stubborn, Caleb continued, which only made him more stubborn. Eleanor watched from the barn doorway. She'd been mucking stalls when Caleb entered. Now she stood frozen, pitchfork forgotten, transfixed by what she was seeing, or rather, what she wasn't seeing. No force, no strategy, just presence. Miguel appeared beside her quietly. "He's been in there 20 minutes. Hasn't moved once, I know," Eleanor whispered. "That's not normal Challenger behavior." "No, it's not." They watched Caleb sit and talk to a horse that wouldn't come closer, watched the sun move across the sky, watched nothing happen, which was somehow everything. Caleb's voice drifted across the corral clearly. "Took me 4 months to convince Whiskey. 4 months of sitting just like this, talking about nothing, proving I was boring." He paused, picked up a piece of dried grass, studied it carefully. "You're smarter than Whiskey was," he said to Obsidian. "I can see it in your eyes. You're not just reacting. You're thinking." Calculating risk versus reward, Obsidian took 1 step forward, then stopped, reconsidering. Caleb's pulse jumped, but he didn't react, didn't turn his head, didn't acknowledge the movement at all. The horse took another step, then another, closing the distance. From 30 feet to 25, Eleanor's breath caught. Miguel made a small sound of surprise. "He's doing it," Miguel whispered. "He's actually approaching." "Don't speak," Eleanor said. "Don't break whatever's happening." In the corral, Caleb kept talking, but his mind had split in 2. Part of him stayed present, focused on the horse. Part of him slipped backward through time. Tennessee, 1863, deep forest. Confederate movements nearby. Caleb crouched behind a fallen oak, absolutely still. Had been for 16 hours. His legs cramped. His back ached. Mosquitoes fed on his neck. He couldn't swat them. Movement meant death. Through the trees, he could see the camp. 30 men, maybe 40. He needed to count them. learn their positions, understand their strength, before his unit engaged. So he waited, motionless, patient, while every instinct screamed at him to move, to act, to do something. Lieutenant Morrison had chosen him for this work, because Caleb could do what most men couldn't: sit still, endure discomfort, watch without interfering. Most soldiers want to fight, Morrison had said. You're different. You understand that doing nothing is sometimes the hardest thing, and the most important. On the third day of observation, Caleb had gathered enough intelligence, retreated through the forest without being seen. His unit used the information to flank, captured them without firing a shot. Morrison had clapped him on the shoulder. War teaches us that patience keeps you alive. Movement gets you killed. Caleb carried that lesson for 20 years, through battles and peace, through marriage and loss, through 8 years of drifting, and now he was using it. On a horse, in the corral, Obsidian stood 15 feet away, close enough that Caleb could see the individual hairs on his muzzle, close enough to feel the heat radiating from that massive body. The stallion stretched his neck forward, nostrils flared, pulling in Caleb's scent. Then he turned and walked away, back to the far fence. Test completed, information gathered, decision postponed. Caleb let out a breath. He'd been holding it, stood slowly, joints protesting. He'd been sitting for 2 hours. He walked out of the corral without looking back. Eleanor and Miguel met him at the gate. That was more than anyone else, Miguel said. Has managed. It's a start, Caleb replied. Long way from riding. Eleanor studied his face carefully. Where did you learn to be that still? The war. Among other places. You were a soldier? Scout. Union Army. Spent most of my time watching. Instead of fighting. Eleanor nodded slowly. Thank you for not rushing him. Rushing gets you killed. Horse or war? Same principle. He walked to the barn, found tools, started repairing a section of fence that had been sagging. Eleanor brought him coffee around noon. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching Miguel work with the cattle. In the distance, your husband, Caleb said finally. How long did you know him? Married at 19. Everyone said we were too young, were you? Probably. But being young and being wrong aren't always the same thing. Caleb smiled. No, I suppose they're not. Eleanor watched him work. His movements were efficient, practiced. He knew what he was doing. You've done ranch work before, here and there. Montana to Texas. Never stayed anywhere long. Why not? The question hung in the air. Caleb set down his hammer, looked at her directly. Because staying means building, and building means believing in tomorrow. And I stopped believing in tomorrow about 8 years ago. What happened 8 years ago? He was quiet for so long. She thought he wouldn't answer. Then I lost my family, wife and daughter. Fever took them both. Eleanor's expression softened. I'm sorry, so am I. They worked together the rest of the afternoon. Didn't talk much. Didn't need to. Some understandings ran deeper than words. Lay 10 brought trouble to the ranch. Miguel discovered it at dawn. The main water trough, the one that served all the livestock, was contaminated. A dead coyote floated in it, bloated and stinking. Clearly dead for days. Accident? Eleanor asked when he told her. Miguel shook his head firmly. Trough 6 feet deep. Coyote didn't jump in on its own. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Morton's. Can't prove it. Don't need to prove what we already know. Caleb appeared from the bunkhouse, took one look at their faces, asked what was wrong. Miguel showed him the trough. How long to clean it? Caleb asked. Half a day. But that's not the problem. Problem is the livestock. Need water now. We've got to move them. To the creek, a mile away. Through open ground. Storm coming? Caleb looked at the sky. Dark clouds building in the west. Always is this time of year. They gathered the herd together. 50 head of cattle, skittish from the disrupted routine. Eleanor rode her mare. Miguel managed the gates. Caleb borrowed a horse from the barn, a solid bay gelding. That knew its job. The cattle moved reluctantly. They didn't like leaving familiar ground, didn't trust the change. Eleanor and Caleb worked the flanks, keeping them together, pushing them forward. They were halfway to the creek when the wolves appeared, 3 of them, gray and gaunt, drawn by the movement and the scent of vulnerable animals. They circled at a distance, testing, watching for weakness The cattle sensed them immediately, started to scatter, panic rippling through the herd. Like electricity, hold them together, Eleanor shouted. Caleb was already moving. He positioned himself between the wolves and the herd. Read their pattern, like he'd learned to read. Enemy movements, they were coordinating. One would draw attention, while the others looked for openings. The lead wolf feinted toward a calf that had separated from its mother. Caleb rode at it hard, fired a warning shot. From his rifle, the wolf retreated, but didn't leave, just circled wider, looking for a different angle. Eleanor's horse spooked at the gunshot. Reared nearly through her, she held on, got the mare under control, but lost ground. The herd started to fragment. Caleb fired again. The wolves backed off another 20 yards, but kept circling. Patient, professional. They'd done this before. They're testing us, Caleb called to Eleanor. Looking for fear. I can see that. Don't give them any. Another wolf broke from the circle, crushed at the calf, got within 10 feet. Before Caleb was there, horse and rider moving as one unit. He didn't shoot this time, just charged straight at the predator. Made himself bigger, louder, more dangerous than the wolf wanted to deal with. It retreated, rejoined the pack. They conferred in that silent way. Wolves do, and Caleb knew they were deciding whether this meal was worth the fight. Michael appeared from the rear, fired 2 shots. In quick succession, the sound echoed across the valley. Final warning, the wolves left, melted back into the grassland like smoke. Gone. Gone but not forgotten. The rest of the drive was tense. Everyone watching the horizon, but they reached the creek without further incident, got the cattle, settled and watered. Eleanor sat on her horse, breathing hard, adrenaline still singing through her veins. You handled that well. Caleb was checking his rifle, reloading the spent rounds. Wolves and men, aren't that different? Read the threat. Don't panic. Show you're not prey. You learn that. In the war, too? Among other things, they rode back to the ranch in silence. Miguel stayed with the herd. Caleb and Eleanor arrived to find the trough cleaned and refilled. Miguel must have sent one of the part-time hands to deal with it at the barn. Eleanor dismounted, stood looking at Caleb for a long moment. Someone wanted us struggling today, I noticed. Want to guess who? Mordens are the obvious answer. They're too smart to leave proof. Caleb nodded, which means the next move won't be subtle. That night he sat with Obsidian's corral for an hour. After dark, the stallion came closer than before. 10 feet now. Instead of 15, progress measured in inches. Someone's trying to hurt the people who take care of you, Caleb said quietly. Don't know if you understand. Don't know if you care. But I'm telling you anyway. Obsidian's ears flicked toward him. Listening, maybe. Or just tolerating the sound. Your owner, Eleanor. She's fighting to keep this place. Fighting people who want her to fail. And she's doing it alone, mostly. Her and now me, I guess. The horse shifted weight. Took 1 step closer. 9 feet. I'm not going anywhere, Caleb said. Just so you know. Not until this is finished, whatever this turns out to be. Day 15 brought triumph and disaster. In equal measure, the triumph came first. Caleb entered the corral with a halter in his hands. Not to use, just to show. Let Obsidian see it, smell it, understand it wasn't a threat. The horse had been accepting Caleb's presence for days now. Let him approach. Within touching distance, stood still while Caleb talked and moved around him. The next step was restraint, teaching the stallion that accepting a halter didn't mean giving up. Freedom Caleb held out, the leather straps. Obsidian's ears went back. His body tensed, but he didn't bolt, didn't attack, just stood there. Considering I know, Caleb said softly. I know it feels wrong, but you remember this. You wore one before. For Daniel, he moved slowly, telegraphing every motion to Obsidian's nose. Let him investigate. The horse snorted, tossed his head, but didn't retreat. Caleb lowered the halter. Tried again. This time Obsidian held still, let the leather touch his muzzle, let Caleb slip it over his ears the moment it settled into place. The stallion exploded into motion, not attacking, just testing. He reared, pulled against the unfamiliar pressure, every instinct screaming at him to fight or flee. Caleb held firm, not pulling back, not forcing, just maintaining steady contact. His voice calm and low, I know. I know it hurts, but you're safe. I promise you're safe. 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. Then Obsidian stopped fighting, stood trembling, sides heaving, but accepting. Good boy, Caleb breathed. That's it. You're all right. He left the halter on for 2 minutes, then carefully removed it. The lesson was acceptance, not endurance. They'd build duration slowly. Eleanor watched from the fence, tears in her eyes. Miguel stood beside her, nodding approval. Daniel took 3 weeks. To get to that point, Miguel said quietly. Eleanor couldn't speak, just watched Caleb praise the horse, watched Obsidian lean into the touch, watched something she thought was broken begin to mend. The disaster came. 2 hours later, a wagon rolled up the drive, Patricia and Thomas and a third man. Eleanor didn't recognize well-dressed. Carrying a leather satchel, professional Eleanor met them. In the yard, Caleb appeared from the barn, noticed the tension, and stayed close. Mother Eleanor, Patricia said. Her voice had that particular sweetness. That meant trouble. We need to talk. So talk, Patricia gestured to the well-dressed man. This is Mr. Hennessy. He's a lawyer. From Copper Ridge, Eleanor's stomach dropped. What's this about? Hennessy opened his satchel. Withdrew a document, Mrs. Vance. I'm here to serve, you notice, of a competency hearing. It's been scheduled for 30 days. From today, a hearing to determine whether you're capable of managing your affairs, specifically this ranch. Eleanor took the document with shaking hands. Read the first paragraph, then the second. The words blurred together. Incompetent, endangering public safety, mismanaging finances, irrational behavior at the bottom. 17 signatures, Valley residents who'd signed a petition saying Eleanor Vance needed a conservator. You did this, Eleanor said. Her voice was flat. Dead? We're trying to help you by taking my ranch, by ensuring it's managed properly. Patricia's mask of concern cracked slightly. You're running a dangerous horse challenge with money you don't have. The ranch is declining. You're refusing reasonable offers. These are signs of what? Of a woman trying to survive on her own? Of someone who won't sell her family's land to vultures? Thomas stepped comfortable. Guilty. Mother, we're worried. About you. Don't. Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare use worry. To justify this, Caleb moved closer. The lawyer noticed him for the first time. And you are Caleb Rohr. I work here, Mrs. Vance. Do you have legal counsel? Eleanor almost laughed. Counsel? With what money? No, you should consider retaining someone. The hearing is in 30 days. If the judge rules in favor of the petition, Patricia and Thomas will be appointed. As conservators, they'll have legal authority to manage the ranch, including the right to sell it. Settle debts, the words landed like blows. Sell it. Take everything her father built, everything Daniel loved, everything she'd fought for. There's already a buyer. Interested, the lawyer continued. The Morton family has made a generous offer, and there it was. The Mortons wanted her land, had wanted it for years. Now they'd found a legal way to take it. Caleb spoke up. You've been retained by the Mortons to file this petition. That's a conflict of interest. Hennessy's eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying. I'm stating. James Morton lost $50 to Mrs. Vance. His pride's hurt. His father wants this land. You took their money to manufacture a legal reason to take it. That's not law. That's theft. That's theft with paperwork. Patricia's face flushed. How dare you? Thomas interrupted. Mother. His voice was quiet. Is it true? Are you having financial trouble? Eleanor looked at her son, saw genuine concern, mixed with confusion. He didn't know. Patricia had done this without telling him. Everything I'm managing, Eleanor said. Managing how? Thomas pressed. The petition says the ranch is declining, that you're running a challenge. That loses money. Is that true? Eleanor wanted to lie, wanted to say everything was fine, but she was tired of pretending. I owe the bank $2,000. I have 72 days to pay it. Thomas's face went pale. Why didn't you? Tell me. Because it's not your burden. It's mine. But I could help. I don't need help. I need to be left alone to run my ranch the way I see fit. Patricia made a dismissive sound. You see, this is exactly what we're talking about. Refusing help, refusing to see reason, putting pride ahead of practicality. Eleanor turned to the lawyer. 30 days? Yes. Ma'am, the hearing will determine 3 things: financial stability, sound judgment, safe operation of the ranch. If you can't demonstrate all 3, the petition will be granted, and if I can, then you remain sole owner. An operator, Hennessy, returned to his wagon. Patricia followed. Thomas lingered, looking torn between his wife and his mother. Thomas, Eleanor said, "Did you sign that petition?" "No, I swear. I didn't know about it until after." "Then go home. Think about what kind of man you want to be, your father's son or hers." Thomas flinched, opened his mouth to respond, closed it. Finally he turned and left. After they disappeared down the road, Eleanor stood in the yard, holding the petition, shaking with rage and fear and exhaustion. Caleb touched her elbow gently. "We'll fight this, Hal. They're right. I am failing. The ranch is declining. I am acting irrationally. By their standards, then we change. Their standards, 30 days. We make this place profitable. We prove the challenge has purpose, Hal. By succeeding, I ride Obsidian. You show the judge. A horse that was dangerous is now trained. Proof of your sound judgment." Eleanor looked at him. "You're not ready. The horse isn't ready. Then we get ready." Together, Miguel appeared from the barn, his face grim. He'd heard everything. "I'll help however I can." Eleanor looked at the 2 men standing with her, a foreman who'd stayed 3 years past when he should have retired, a drifter who had $50 to his name and no reason to care about her problems. But they were here, and they were willing to fight. She nodded. 30 days, we do, whatever it takes. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay in the bunkhouse, listening to Miguel's steady breathing from the other bunk, and thought about the photograph. In his coat pocket, Sarah's face, Annie's smile. The family he'd failed to save. Finally, he gave up, dressed quietly, walked outside the November air, bit through his shirt. Stars overhead. Cold and indifferent, he found himself at the corral fence, though he hadn't consciously decided to go there. Obsidian was a shadow in the darkness, visible only when he moved. Caleb pulled out the photograph, unfolded it carefully. The moonlight was just bright enough to see their faces. Sarah, dark hair, kind eyes, the sort of smile that made you want to be a better man. She'd married him when he came back from the war, broken and silent, had seen past the damage to whatever was underneath, had believed he could heal Annie, 8 years old. In this picture, missing her too. Front teeth, wild hair that never stayed braided. She'd called him Papa and meant it as the highest title in the world, both dead because he'd been away. When they needed him most, I was working, he said. To their faces, railroad survey. Gone 3 weeks. Sarah sent word to town when they got sick. But the message didn't reach me. I came home, and you were already buried. The photograph didn't answer. It never did. If I'd come back 1 day earlier, if I'd been there, if I'd... Caleb? He turned. Eleanor stood a few feet away, wrapped in a shawl. Hesitant to intrude. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to wake anyone." "You didn't. I couldn't sleep either." She moved closer, saw the photograph in his hands. "Your family?" He nodded. "May I?" He handed it to her. She studied it in the moonlight. Something in her expression softened. "They're beautiful, they were. How long ago?" 8 years fever took them both. Within a day, Eleanor handed back the photograph carefully, like it was made of glass. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. When it happened, I was working. By the time I got home, they were gone. That wasn't your fault, I know that. In my head, but my heart says different." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Eleanor spoke quietly. "After Daniel died, I pushed everyone away. Thomas, the neighbors, even Miguel. Turned this ranch into a fortress. Turned myself into stone. Why? Because caring hurts. And I'd hurt enough." Caleb understood that, had done the same thing. For 8 years, built walls. Out of motion. Stayed nowhere long enough to care. The challenge, Eleanor continued. It wasn't about the horse. Not really. What was it about? She was quiet. For so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, testing whether I could still believe in anything good. Every man who failed proved what I feared. That patience, kindness, understanding, all the things Daniel had, they died with him. That the world had moved on to something harder, meaner. And now you're here, doing exactly what Daniel did. proving that maybe. I was wrong. That good men still exist. Caleb felt the weight of that, the responsibility. I'm not a good man, Eleanor. I'm just a man, trying to outrun his failures. Then why did you stay? You could have tried the challenge and left. Win or lose, why stay? And help. He thought about that, about the halter going on Obsidian this afternoon, about the petition, about Eleanor standing in her yard shaking with rage and fear, still fighting. Because I'm tired of running, he said finally. Tired of pretending? Motion is the same as purpose, and because you remind me of something. I'd forgotten. What's that? That fighting for something is better than running from everything. Eleanor moved closer, close enough that he could smell lavender and wood smoke and hard work. I'm scared, she said, of the hearing, of losing this place, of trusting someone again and having it end same way. So am I. But you're staying anyway? I'm staying anyway. She took his hand. Her fingers were calloused, cold from the night air. Thank you. They stood like that. For a moment, two damaged people holding on to each other in the dark, not romantic, just human. Two souls recognizing the same wounds. Finally, Eleanor stepped back. I should try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard. They all are. She smiled slightly at that. Yes, but we'll face it. Together, after she left. Caleb looked at the photograph one more time. I hope you'd understand, he told Sarah and Annie. Hope you'd want this for me. Want me to. Want me to. Try again. He folded the photograph away, turned to Obsidian. The horse had moved closer during the conversation, 8 feet away now, close enough that Caleb could see his eyes. Reflecting starlight. She's scared, Caleb said to the stallion. So am I. So are you. Maybe being scared is better than. Being alone, Obsidian didn't move, didn't approach or retreat. Just stood there, breathing, thinking, deciding. And in that moment, Caleb understood something fundamental. The horse wasn't broken. He was grieving. And grief made you careful, made you test. Before trusting, made you wait. To see if this new person would prove themselves worthy. Daniel had proven himself worthy. Had earned 2 years of trust. Before it all ended, on a ridge trail, now Caleb was asking. The same thing, asking Obsidian to risk again, to choose trust over safety, to believe that maybe. This time would be different. I know what. I'm asking, Caleb said quietly. No, it's not fair. No, you've already lost once. But I'm asking anyway. Will you trust me, Horse Took? 1 step forward, then another, 6 feet now, close enough to touch. If Caleb extended his arm, Caleb didn't move, didn't reach, just stood still, and let Obsidian choose. And after a moment that stretched like eternity, the stallion closed the distance, pressed his nose against Caleb's chest, just for a second, just long enough to say, I'm considering it. Then he wheeled and retreated to the far fence. Test completed. Information gathered. Caleb's hands were shaking. His heart hammered in his chest. That brief touch felt like more than any victory he'd won in war. More significant than any battle survived, because this wasn't conquest. This was connection, and connection required something battles didn't. It required being vulnerable, enough to trust. He walked back to the bunkhouse, lay down, and for the first time in 8 years, slept through the night without nightmares. Day 20 arrived, cold and clear. 10 days until. The hearing, Caleb stood outside the corral at dawn, holding a halter. The leather was worn soft from years of use. Daniel's halter. Eleanor had brought it to him the night before, without saying where. She'd found it, but Caleb didn't enter the corral. Instead, he opened the gate, walked to the center, and placed the halter on the ground. Then he walked back out. Eleanor appeared from the barn. What are you doing? Seeing if he chooses. Chooses what? To trust me or not. Either way, I'll respect it. Miguel joined them at the fence. The 3 of them stood in the cold morning air, breath misting, watching a black horse at the far end of the corral. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Obsidian grazed, drank from the trough, ignored the halter completely, or seemed to. Eleanor shifted her weight. Caleb, wait another 5 minutes. The sun climbed higher. Light spilled across the valley, turning frost to diamonds. Then Obsidian lifted his head, looked at the halter lying in the dirt, looked at Caleb. Standing outside the fence, the horse walked forward. Not hesitant, not cautious, deliberate, like he'd made a decision and was seeing it through. He reached the halter, lowered his head, sniffed it. Then he picked it up in his teeth, carried it across the corral, stopped at the fence directly in front of Caleb, and dropped it. At his feet, Miguel made a sound, halfway between a laugh and a sob. "I'll be damned." Eleanor pressed her hand to her mouth. Caleb stood very still. His throat had closed up. His eyes stung. He looked at the horse, the halter, at the gift that had just been given. "Thank you," he whispered. He opened the gate, entered slowly. Obsidian stood his ground, didn't retreat, didn't advance, just waited. Caleb picked up the halter, showed it to the stallion. "You remember this. You wore it." For Daniel, Obsidian's ears flicked forward. "I'm going to put it on you now. Not because I'm forcing you, but because you chose to let me." He moved with careful precision, slipped the halter over Obsidian's nose, buckled it gently. The horse stood absolutely still. "It's accepting, good boy," Caleb breathed. "That's it. You chose this. You chose me." Miguel had turned away, wiping his eyes. Eleanor watched with tears streaming down her face. Caleb led Obsidian in a slow circle. The horse followed, without resistance, responded to gentle pressure on the lead, stopped when asked, turned when guided. 2 years of Daniel's training, dormant for 3 years, coming back like muscle memory after 10 minutes. Caleb removed the halter, gave Obsidian the choice to leave. The horse stayed close, nuzzled Caleb's shoulder, then walked away to graze, calm and content. Eleanor met Caleb. "At the gate, he chose you. He did. Daniel did the same thing," Miguel said quiet. "Week 12. Put the bridle on the ground." Obsidian brought it to him. Caleb looked at the foreman. "Eleanor told me." Then his expression changed, became troubled. "Can I talk to you? Private?" They walked to the barn. Miguel leaned against a support post, suddenly looking older than his 58 years. "I need to tell you something," Miguel said, "about the day. Daniel died." Caleb waited. "I was supposed to ride with him, check the fence line on the ridge, but I'd been drinking the night before. Fell asleep. He went alone. Miguel, if I'd been there, maybe I could have grabbed the reins, could have stopped the fall, could have saved him." Miguel's voice cracked. "I think about that every day, what I could have done different." Caleb thought about Sarah and Annie, about being away when they needed him, about guilt that sat in your chest like a stone, or you'd both be dead, Caleb said gently. Horse spooked on a narrow trail. 2 riders might have made it worse. "You can't know." Eleanor said the same thing. Said Daniel told her to let me sleep, that it wasn't my fault. Miguel looked at him with haunted eyes. "But I still carry it. I can't seem to put it down. I understand that better than you know." They stood in silence for a moment, 2 men carrying different versions of the same burden. "Why are you telling me this?" Caleb asked. "Because that horse chose you, same way he chose Daniel, and I need you to know what you're taking on. What it means." Miguel straightened. "Take care of him, the horse, and Eleanor. Promise me I will." Miguel nodded. Seemed like he wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. Finally he clapped Caleb on the shoulder and walked away. Day 25 arrived, cold and clear. 5 days until the hearing. Caleb worked with Obsidian on the saddle. The horse accepted it being placed, but tensed when cinched. Not ready for mounting yet, but close. Thomas Vance arrived alone. In the morning, no Patricia, no lawyer, just him and his horse, and a hesitant knock on Eleanor's door. She answered with the suspicion written clear on her face. "What do you want?" "To talk." "Please." Eleanor considered slamming the door. Considered a lot of things, but Thomas was her son, Daniel's son. That had to count. "For something, talk then." Thomas twisted his hat in his hands. "Patricia forged my signature on that petition. I didn't know about it until after the lawyer came." "I swear." Eleanor's expression didn't change. "Go on." "I've been thinking." "About what kind of man?" "I want to be Dad's son, or hers." He looked up, met her eyes. "I want to be Dad's son. I've been too scared to stand up to her. Scared of her anger, scared of being alone. And now I'm more scared of losing you, of being the kind of man who lets his mother fight alone while he hides behind his wife's skirts." Something in Eleanor's chest loosened slightly. "What about Patricia?" I told her. "I'm not supporting the petition. Told her to drop it, or I'm leaving." Thomas's voice was steady now. Decided, she said. I'm a fool. Said I'm choosing a failing ranch over our future. So I chose, Thomas. I have $3,000. I want to loan it to you. Same terms as the bank. You pay me back when you can. Eleanor stared at him. I can't take your money. Why not? Because it's yours. You earned it, and I'm choosing to help with it. That's what family does, isn't it? Helps when it's needed. Eleanor's eyes stung Thomas into a hug. First time in 3 years. He hugged back hard, like a boy, instead of a man, trying to prove himself when they both had tears on their faces. Thank you, Eleanor said. Can I see him? The horse they walked to, the corral together. Caleb was there, working with obsidian. The saddle was on now. Full tack, accepting the weight. Thomas watched in silence. Then, Dad loved that horse, I know, Caleb said. He'd like what? You're doing the patience? Caleb nodded acknowledgement. Thomas lingered, helped with small tasks, held gates, fetched equipment, worked beside his mother, for the first time since the funeral in the afternoon, while Eleanor was in the house. Thomas approached Caleb. You love her, my mother. Caleb paused mid-motion. I respect her. It's more than that. I can see it. Caleb set down the brush he'd been using on obsidian. Your wife wouldn't approve. Patricia isn't my wife anymore, or won't be soon. I'm filing for separation. Thomas's voice was quiet, but certain. And for what? It's worth. You have my blessing if it goes that way, Thomas. Dad's been gone 3 years. Mom deserves to be happy, and you're the first person I've seen make her smile. Since he died, Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Thomas left at sunset, promised to return with the money. In 2 days, promised to stand with Eleanor at the hearing after he left. Eleanor found Caleb in the barn, Thomas told me. About the loan, Caleb said it solves one problem, not the others. We'll solve the others, too. Eleanor stepped closer, close enough that he could smell lavender and wood smoke and hard work. You're staying, aren't you, after the hearing, after you ride? Obsidian, do you want me? Yes. Then I'm staying, she kissed him. Soft at first, tentative, testing, then deeper when, he responded, when his hands found her waist and pulled her closer when they finally broke apart. Both were breathing hard. I love you, Caleb said. The words surprised him. He hadn't planned them, but they were true. Eleanor smiled, actually smiled. I love you too, even though you're stubborn and damaged and terrible at asking for help. That's a hell of a declaration. I'm a practical woman. Figured you should know what you're getting into. He laughed, actually laughed. First time in years. Fair enough. They stood in the barn as darkness fell. Two people who'd been alone too long, finding each other in the ruins of their separate griefs outside. Obsidian stood in his corral and watched the stars. A horse who'd chosen to trust again, who'd picked up a halter and carried it to a man who needed proof that broken things could heal. And in that moment, all three of them, woman, man, horse, were a little less broken than before. 3 days later, Eleanor found Caleb in the barn. He was checking Obsidian's legs, making sure the hard work hadn't caused damage. The horse was fine, better than fine. He seemed different, calmer, like proving himself had settled something. Deep inside, can we talk? Eleanor asked. Of course. They walked to the house, sat at the kitchen table with coffee. Neither of them drank. Eleanor twisted her cup in her hands. I need to tell you something about the challenge. Caleb waited. I didn't create it. To save Obsidian, she said quietly. I mean, I told myself that, told everyone that. But it wasn't true. What was it for? Testing myself, testing whether I could still believe in anything good. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Every man who tried and failed proved what I feared. That patience, kindness, understanding. All the things Daniel had. They died with him, Eleanor. Let me finish. She looked at him. I was using that horse to protect myself, to prove that trying again was pointless, that I should just give up. Sell the ranch, stop fighting. But you didn't give up because you showed up, doing exactly what Daniel did, proving I was wrong. Tears gathered in her eyes. You weren't just healing the horse. You were healing me, showing me that faith isn't about never being hurt. It's about choosing to believe anyway. Caleb reached across the table, took her hand. I wasn't healing anyone. To heal myself, we healed each other. Then they sat in silence for a moment. Then Eleanor stood, went to the lockbox, retrieved a small object wrapped in cloth. She returned to the table, unwrapped it. Daniel's wedding ring, silver, worn smooth by 23 years, of where I want you. To have this, she said. Eleanor, I can't. Please. Listen. She held the ring like it was made of light. This was his. He wore it every day of our marriage, and I want you. To wear it, I don't want. To replace him, you're not. You're continuing. What he started, showing me that love, doesn't end. When someone dies, it transforms, grows, includes new people, without erasing. The old Caleb looked at the ring, at Eleanor, at the life. Being offered, marry me, she said. He blinked. What? Marry me. Caleb roared, be my partner in this ranch, this life, this future. We're building, Eleanor. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a month, but I'm tired of being careful, tired of protecting myself from feeling I love you and I want whatever time we have left to be spent together. Caleb felt his throat close, felt 8 years of running crash into one moment of absolute clarity. I was going to ask you, he said. What? I was going to ask you tonight. Had it all planned. He laughed shakily. But you beat me to it. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Absolutely yes. On one condition. What? I take the ring. Wear it, not to replace Daniel, but to honor him, to carry forward what he believed in. Eleanor handed him the ring. He slid it onto his perfectly, like fit had been, waiting for him. They kissed, long and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were crying and laughing and holding each other like drowning people. Hold driftwood. I love you, Caleb said. Didn't think I could. Didn't think I could. Again, didn't think I deserved to. But I do. I love you too, even though you're difficult and stubborn, and you drove me crazy for 2 weeks, just standing. At that fence, he grinned. Had to be patient. Forcing it would have failed, and you don't come to things to fail anymore. No, I don't. That night, they told Miguel. He pulled them both into a crushing hug and cried. Without shame, Daniel would approve. He said, I'd like you, Caleb, would see what you did with that horse and recognize a kindred spirit. Thank you. And Eleanor. Miguel held her shoulders. You deserve this. Deserve to be happy. Don't let anyone tell you different. I won't. They set the wedding for 3 weeks out, invited the neighbors who'd stood with Eleanor during hard times. Thomas, now officially separated from Patricia, a few ranch hands, the circuit preacher, who passed through monthly, honest, real the night before the wedding. Caleb walked to Daniel's grave. It sat under a cottonwood by the creek, simple marker, just his name and dates. Caleb knelt in the grass. I'm marrying your wife tomorrow, wearing your ring, taking on your ranch. And your legacy, the grave didn't answer. Graves never did. I'll take care of her, the ranch, obsidian, everything you built. I promise. He sat there for a long time, then spoke to different graves. One's 1,000 miles away in Wyoming, Sarah. Annie, I'm choosing to live again, choosing to love again, and I think, I hope, would want that, the creek whispered. The cottonwood rustled, the stars watched with their cold indifference, but Caleb felt something shift, a weight he'd carried for 8 years, finally lifting. Not gone, never gone, lighter, bearable. He stood, walked back to the ranch, to Eleanor, waiting on the porch, to the future he'd chosen instead of run from. Day 29 arrived. Cold and threatening. The hearing was tomorrow. Storm warnings came with the dawn. Miguel's knee ached, which meant weather was changing. The barometer in the barn confirmed it. Pressure dropping fast. Big one coming, Miguel said. Tonight, maybe. Tomorrow for certain. Eleanor looked at the sky. Clouds building in the west, dark and heavy. Can we postpone the hearing? Judge won't care. Morton's will use it as more evidence. Unreliable weather judgment. They were trapped. Had to proceed. Regardless of conditions, Caleb spent the morning. With Obsidian, the saddle went on. Easily now. The horse accepted bit and bridle. All that remained was the actual mounting. The moment of ultimate trust. Tomorrow, Caleb said to the stallion, tomorrow I'll ask you to carry me, and you'll choose whether to allow it. Obsidian's ears flicked. He understood tone, if not words, understood that. Something significant was approaching. The day passed with terrible slowness, everyone moving through tasks with half their mind On tomorrow, on the judge, on what would happen. If they failed, evening came. Eleanor made dinner, but no one was hungry. They picked at food and made small talk. That meant nothing after the dishes were washed. Miguel pulled out a bottle of whiskey, poured 3 glasses. Normally he was moderate with drink. Tonight he wasn't. Caleb joined him. On the porch, Eleanor stayed inside, giving them space. Michael drank in silence for a while. Then, I'm leaving after this, after the hearing. Win or lose, where will you go? Santa Fe. My sister runs a trading post there. Been asking me to help. For years, Miguel stared into his glass. Time I stopped living. In the past, you've earned rest, maybe. Miguel poured another drink. You know why. I really stayed after Daniel died? Loyalty, guilt, the word came out harsh. Miguel's face twisted. I should have been with him that day, should have been there to help. But I was hungover, lazy. 3 years I've carried this, 3 years of wondering. If things would have been different, if he'd still be alive. If I'd just done my job. Caleb thought about his own guilt. About Sarah and Annie and being away when they needed him. You can't know that. Can't know how. It would have gone, Eleanor. Said the same thing, said Daniel, told her, to let me sleep, that it wasn't my fault. Miguel's hands shook. But I can't believe it. Can't forgive myself. The door opened. Eleanor stood there, backlit by lamplight. Her face was still. Miguel, he froze. You heard that, I heard. Long silence. Miguel looked like he wanted to disappear. Into the floorboards. Eleanor sat down. Beside him, Daniel told me, the night before. Specifically said, Miguel works too hard. Let the man rest. It wasn't your fault, but if I'd been there, you might both be dead. The trail was narrow. 2 riders could have made it worse. Or you'd have fallen too. Or the horse would have panicked. With 2 people. And killed you both. Her voice was firm. You couldn't have stopped it. Miguel broke, just completely shattered. 30 years of strength and stoicism crumbling in one moment. Put a face in his hands and sobbed. Deep, wrenching sounds. That came from somewhere primal. Eleanor wrapped her arms around him, held him while he cried. Caleb looked away, giving them privacy in the moment when Miguel finally composed himself. His face was ravaged, but somehow lighter. I should have told you. Years ago, I should have told you. I didn't blame you. We've both been carrying things we didn't need. To carry, they sat together, the 3 of them, and drank to Daniel's memory, to forgiveness, to letting go of burdens. That served no purpose eventually. Miguel stood. I should sleep. Big day tomorrow after he left. Eleanor and Caleb remained on the porch. The wind was picking up. Storm getting closer. Are you scared? Eleanor asked, terrified. Me too. Caleb thought about tomorrow, about writing Obsidian in front of a judge, about proving Eleanor's competence. While a storm approached, about all the ways it could go wrong. I need to tell you something, he said. About the war. Eleanor waited. I wasn't just a scout. I killed men, watched friends die, did things I'm not proud of. His voice was low, steady. After the war, I thought I could leave it behind. Married Sarah. Had Annie built something clean. But you can't outrun what you've done. The nightmares came back, the guilt, and when Sarah and Annie died, all of it crashed together. War guilt, survivor guilt, the feeling that I didn't deserve to live when better people had died. Eleanor took his hand. I've been running for 8 years, Caleb continued, town to town, job to job, never staying long enough to build anything, because building means believing you deserve a future. And I didn't believe that. And now, he looked at her, now I'm choosing to stay, choosing to try, even though I'm scared, even though I might fail, because you. And that horse taught me something. What? That trust isn't about never falling. It's about choosing to stand back up and choosing someone to rise with. Eleanor leaned against him. They sat in silence as the first drops of rain began to fall. Inside the bunkhouse, Miguel lay awake and felt 3 years of weight lift from his shoulders. He'd confessed, been forgiven, could finally start to let go. And in the corral, Obsidian stood in the increasing wind and rain. A storm was coming, a big one, the kind that changed things, the kind that tested whether trust was real or just another lie. People told themselves the horse had been through storms before, had survived them alone. But tomorrow he wouldn't be alone. Tomorrow a man would ask him to carry weight again, to trust again, to risk everything, on the belief that this time would be different, and Obsidian would have. To choose stay safe and stay alone, or trust and risk losing everything again, the choice every broken thing eventually faces. Morning came gray and bitter. The storm had hit. During the night, not the full force yet, but enough to coat everything in ice. The ground glittered like broken glass. Trees bent under the weight of frozen rain. Judge Harrison arrived. At 8, an older man with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense he'd ridden from Copper Ridge in a covered wagon, cursing the weather. The whole way, Patricia and Thomas came, separately, Patricia with the lawyer. Thomas, as alone as promised the Morton patriarch, came too, James's father, a man who'd spent 40 years acquiring land and saw no reason to stop now. He stood apart from the others, watching Eleanor like a hawk. Watch as a rabbit. Let's make this quick, Judge Harrison said. Weather's getting worse. I want to be back in town before the roads become impassable. The hearing convened in Eleanor's kitchen, too cold to stand outside. The judge sat at the head of the table, Eleanor and Caleb. On one side, Patricia, Hennessy, and Morton on the other. Thomas stood by the door, positioned carefully. Between both camps, Mrs. Vance, the judge began. Petition claims 3 things: financial instability, unsound judgment, unsafe operation. How do you respond? Eleanor had prepared. For this, had rehearsed with Caleb and Miguel, but having it asked directly still made her throat tight. I owe the bank $2,000, due in 63 days. My son has offered a loan to cover it. I accept his offer. Financial instability addressed. Thomas nodded confirmation. The judge made a note. Unsound judgment. I run a training challenge. Challengers pay $50 to attempt riding a horse. I'm rehabilitating. If they succeed, they earn $500 in ownership. The horse was dangerous. After trauma, I've been using the challenge to fund the ranch while working. To heal him, 32 men have tried and failed, Hennessy interjected. That's $1,600 in revenue against a potential $500 loss. The horse remains unridden, which means Mrs. Vance is running a rigged challenge, taking money she knows won't be earned. The challenge isn't rigged, Eleanor said. It's difficult. There's a difference. Can anyone ride the horse? The judge asked. Yes, if they approach it correctly. Prove it. Eleanor looked at Caleb. He stood. I'll demonstrate if weather permits. The judge glanced out the window. Sleet was falling. Harder now. Make it quick. They moved outside, the whole group. Even Morton, curious despite himself. Caleb walked to the barn. Obsidian was in his stall, calm despite the storm. Building outside, Caleb saddled him with practiced efficiency. The horse stood still, accepted bit and bridle. Everything they'd worked toward. Leading to this moment, he led Obsidian to the corral. The footing was treacherous, ice everywhere. Not ideal conditions for a first ride, nothing about. This day was ideal. Eleanor held the gate. Caleb walked Obsidian to the mounting block. You ready? Caleb asked quietly. Just him and the horse. Everyone else far enough away they couldn't hear. Obsidian's ears flicked forward. His body was tense, but not panicked. Ready but uncertain. I'm asking you to carry me, Caleb said. Asking you to trust. That I won't hurt you, that I'll honor. What we've built. He put his foot in the stirrup, felt the saddle shift under his weight. Obsidian's muscles bunched beneath him, coiled tight on the edge of bolting. Caleb swung his other leg over, settled into the saddle for 3 heartbeats. Nothing happened. The world held its breath. Then Obsidian took one step, then another, walking steady and controlled, carrying Caleb like he'd done it 1,000 times before, like he'd never stopped. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Miguel grinned, so wide, his face hurt. Even Thomas looked awed. Patricia's expression soured. Morton's went carefully blank. Caleb rode Obsidian in a slow circle, guided him with legs and reins. The horse responded perfectly, turned, stopped, backed. Every cue met with obedience, not because he was broken, because he chose. To cooperate, the judge watched for 5 minutes, then nodded. Sufficient. The horse is clearly rideable by someone with proper skill. It's your honor, Hennessy started. I said sufficient. The judge turned back. toward the house. Let's continue inside. Caleb dismounted, ran his hand down Obsidian's neck. Thank you, he whispered. You chose to trust me. I won't forget that. He started to lead, the horse back. Then Miguel shouted, From the north pasture, Eleanor! The cattle. Everyone turned. Miguel was running, limping on his bad knee, waving frantically. The gate's down. Storm knocked it over. They're scattering. Eleanor's face went white. 50 head of cattle, worth $2,500 if they scattered. In this storm, they'd die. Hypothermia, falls, wolves. The valley would kill them. By morning, how many hands? Do you have? The judge asked. Miguel and Caleb, that's it. 2 men can't gather. 50 head. In these conditions, Eleanor looked at the sky. The storm was intensifying, sleet turning to snow, visibility dropping. We have to try, Miguel limped up, breathing hard. My knee's out, can't ride. Eleanor's mare is lame, Caleb said, injured her leg. 3 days ago. Patricia made a disgusted sound. You see? This is exactly what we're talking about. Mismanagement, insufficient staff. Poor planning? Eleanor ignored her, looked at the available horses. Caleb's gelding, and Obsidian, the stallion, stood in the corral, still saddled, watching the commotion. With intelligent eyes, No, Caleb said, reading her thoughts. He's not ready. For that, I just rode him. For the first time. 5 minutes ago, we don't have. A choice, Eleanor. 50 head, $2,500, if we lose them. The ranch fails, regardless of. The hearing, she was right. Caleb knew it. The judge knew it. Everyone knew it. Morton stepped forward. I'll buy them. Right now. $2,000. You won't have to risk anyone. In this storm, Eleanor looked at him, saw the calculation in his eyes. He'd get the cattle cheap, and she'd still owe the bank. Would still fail. No, be reasonable. I said no. She turned to Caleb. Can you do this? Can he handle it? Caleb looked at Obsidian. The horse looked back, asking the same question. Can you do this? Can I trust you? Under pressure, everything they'd built led to this moment, not the demonstration. For the judge, this the real test, only one way to find out, Caleb said. He swung back into the saddle. Eleanor ran for her coat, and Miguel's horse. Together they rode toward the north pasture, the judge called. After them, Mrs. Vance. The hearing can wait. My ranch can't. They disappeared into the storm. Judge Harrison stood in the yard, snow gathering on his shoulders, Patricia beside him, fuming, Morton calculating, Thomas uncertain. This is insane, Patricia said. She's risking their lives. For cattle, she's fighting for her land, the judge said quietly. That's not insanity. That's character. The storm hit full force. As they reached the pasture, visibility dropped to 20 feet. Wind screamed across open ground. The cattle were panicked, scattering in every direction. We need to push them south, Eleanor shouted. Toward the shelter, she took the east flank. Caleb took the west. They worked in tandem, cutting off escape routes, herding the confused animals. Toward safety, Obsidian responded to every cue, moved like he'd been doing this his whole life, cut cattle, blocked runners, turned on a dime when needed. But the horse was also scared. Caleb could feel it, the tension in his muscles, the way his ears kept pinning back. This wasn't the controlled environment of a corral. This was chaos as 20 head gathered. Then 30. The others kept scattering. The calf separated from its mother, ran blind into the storm. Eleanor started after it, but her horse slipped on ice, nearly went down. She pulled up. Couldn't risk it. I'll get it, Caleb shouted. He urged Obsidian forward. The stallion hesitated. This was asking too much, going too far. From safety into unknown danger, I know, Caleb said. I know it's scary, but we have to try. Obsidian made a choice, plunged into the storm after the calf. They found it 50 yards out, stuck in a drift, bawling in terror. Caleb dismounted, grabbed the calf, lifted across the saddle, heavy, awkward. Obsidian danced sideways, but didn't bolt. Then Caleb heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze. Wolves, the same pack from before, drawn by the chaos, the scent of vulnerable prey. 3 of them materialized from the snow, gray shadows moving with purpose. They'd learned from last time, kept their distance, waited for an opening Caleb couldn't reach, his rifle, both hands holding the calf. No way to defend himself. The lead wolf darted forward, testing. Obsidian wheeled to face it. Ears flat, teeth bared no longer, a frightened horse, a stallion protecting his herd. He lunged it, the wolf. The predator retreated, but circled back. Another wolf tried, from the opposite spun, kicked out, with both hind legs, came within inches of the wolf's head. The message was clear: come closer and die. The wolves reassessed, 3 against 1 horse and a man. Holding a calf, the odds were good, but they hadn't counted on the horse's courage. Obsidian stood his ground, positioned himself between the wolves and Caleb, daring them to try. A shot rang out, then another. Eleanor had circled back, rifle in hand. The wolves scattered. She rode up beside Caleb. Get on, now. Caleb swung into the saddle. Off, still across the plot. His lap, they rode hard. For the main herd, the wolves followed at a distance, but didn't attack again by the time they regrouped with the cattle. Both riders were shaking, cold and adrenaline, in equal measure. That was stupid, Eleanor said. That was necessary. You could have died, so could you. So could the calf. She looked at him, snow coating her hair, face red with cold, eyes fierce. Don't do that again. Can't promise that. They pushed the herd south. All 50 accounted for now. Drove them into the shelter. Near the lower pasture, got them settled, with feed and protection from the wind to ride back to the ranch. Took an hour. The storm was easing, slightly. Enough to see. More than 20 feet they arrived to find the judge's wagon. Still there, the man himself, standing on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, drinking coffee Miguel had brought him. Caleb and Eleanor dismounted, both soaked through, both exhausted, but alive. Judge Harrison looked at them, at Obsidian, still calm, despite everything, at the determination written on their faces. All 50, he asked. All 50. Eleanor confirmed, plus in that storm, with 2 riders, one of whom was on a horse he'd ridden. For the first time today. Yes, the judge set down his coffee, Mrs. Vance. I came here prepared to rule against you, the petition made. Compelling arguments, financial trouble, risky behavior, poor judgment. Eleanor's heart sank. But I just watched you risk your life to save your livelihood in conditions that would kill most ranchers. I watched a supposedly dangerous horse perform a rescue. That proves exceptional training and partnership. And I watched you make hard choices under pressure with sound judgment. He pulled out the petition, tore it in half. Petition denied. This ranch remains under your sole management. Patricia made a strangled sound. Your Honor. That's my ruling final. Contested if you want. You'll lose. The judge climbed into his wagon. Get inside and warm up before you both die of exposure. I'll file the paperwork when I get back. To town, the wagon rolled away. Patricia followed in her own wagon, lawyer beside her, both silent with defeat. Morton lingered, approached Eleanor. That was impressive. I'm not selling, I know, but my offer stands. When you're ready, I'll never be ready. He nodded, tipped his hat. We'll see. Then he left. Thomas approached his mother. You did it. We did it. He looked at Caleb, extended his hand. Thank you for helping her. For being here. Caleb shook it. She would have managed. Without me, maybe. But she didn't have to. That matters. After Thomas left, Eleanor and Caleb stood in the yard, snow falling softly now. The storm's fury spent, Miguel appeared from the barn. Get inside, both of you. Before you freeze, they went, stripped off wet coats, stood by the fire, and shook with relief and cold and the aftershocks. Of adrenaline, we won, Eleanor said, like she couldn't quite believe it. We won, Caleb confirmed. She's laughed, then cried, then laughed again. Caleb held her. While she did, all 3 outside, Obsidian stood in his stall, warm, fed, safe. He'd been asked to trust, had chosen to try, and had survived the test. Not just survived, triumphed. The horse lowered his head, closed his eyes, and for the first time in 3 years felt something close to peace. 3 days after the hearing, Eleanor found Caleb. In the barn, he was checking Obsidian's legs, making sure the hard ride through the storm hadn't caused damage. The horse was fine, better than fine. He seemed different, calmer, like proving himself. Had settled something. Deep inside, can we talk? Eleanor asked. Of course. They walked to the house, sat at the kitchen table with coffee. Neither of them drank. Eleanor twisted her cup in her hands. I need to tell you something. About the challenge, Caleb waited. I didn't create it. To save Obsidian, she said quietly. I mean, I told myself that, told everyone that, but it wasn't true. What was it for? Testing myself, testing whether I could still believe in anything good. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Every man who tried and failed proved what I feared, that patience, kindness, understanding, all the things Daniel had, they died with him, Eleanor. Let me finish. She looked at him. I was using that horse to protect myself, to prove that trying again was pointless, that I should just give up, sell the ranch, stop fighting. But you didn't give up because you showed up, doing exactly what Daniel did, proving I was wrong. Tears gathered in her eyes. You weren't just healing the horse. You were healing me, showing me that faith isn't about never being hurt. It's about choosing to believe anyway. Caleb reached across the table, took her hand. I wasn't healing anyone. I was trying to heal myself. We healed each other. Then they sat in silence for a moment. Then Eleanor stood, went to the lockbox, retrieved Daniel's smooth by years of love. I want you to have this, she said. Eleanor, this was his. He wore it every day of our marriage, and I want you to wear it, not as replacement, but as continuation, as proof that love doesn't end, and it transforms. Caleb took the ring, looked at it in the lamplight. Marry me, he said. Eleanor blinked. What, marry me? Eleanor Vance, be my partner in everything I was going to ask you, I know, but I wanted to ask first, to choose this. Not because you offered, but because I'm choosing. Then yes, absolutely yes. On one condition. What? You wear this ring, Daniel's. So part of him is there too. Caleb slid it on. Fit perfectly. I'd be honored. They kissed longer, deeper than before. No reservations now, just commitment. 3 weeks later, the wedding arrived. Cold but clear. Eleanor wore a simple dress, the color of sage. Caleb wore clean clothes and Daniel's ring. They spoke vows they'd written themselves, promising partnership, patience, honesty, choosing each other every day. Even when hard, the circuit preacher pronounced them married. They kissed to applause and whooping from Miguel, who'd consumed perhaps more celebratory whiskey than was strictly necessary. The reception was simple. Food and neighbors who were genuinely happy for them. Thomas stood beside his mother and cried happy tears. For once, Patricia was absent. Thomas had come alone. We're separating, he'd said simply. She's gone back to her family in Missouri. Eleanor had hugged him. I'm sorry, don't be. I'm free. The Morton patriarch appeared, uninvited but not unwelcome. He shook Caleb's hand. You did well with that horse. Thank you. My offer still stands, though, when you're ready. To sell, Eleanor appeared at Caleb's side. We'll never be ready, Morton smiled. The valley's changing. Winter's coming. Markets are dropping. That bank loan might be settled. But ranch life doesn't get easier. We know. Just remember, when the money runs short again, I'll be here. He left. Not hostile. Just patient. Waiting. Eleanor watched him go. He's right, you know. We won the hearing. Got the loan, but the ranch is still struggling. This isn't a happy ending. No, Caleb agreed. It's a happy beginning. The middle will be hard. Can we handle it together? Yes. After the guests left, after Miguel headed, singing off key, Caleb and Eleanor walked to the ranch. The barn roof still leaked in 3 places. Fences sagged. On the eastern property, one water tank had cracked from the freeze winter damage that would cost. Money they barely had. The ranch wasn't saved. It was surviving. But as they walked, Caleb noticed other things. Cattle healthy, despite the storm. Barns solid, despite needing repair. Land good and water clean and potential everywhere. They ended at Obsidian's corral. The stallion came to the fence immediately. No hesitation. Let Caleb stroke his nose. Let Eleanor scratch his ears. You did it, Eleanor said to the horse. You chose to trust again. Obsidian's eyes were calm, content. He'd been tested and proven himself. Had carried Caleb through a storm. Had faced wolves without flinching. Had remembered what it felt like to be part of something. Miguel's leaving tomorrow, Eleanor said. Heading to Santa Fe, I know. The ranch will be just us then. And maybe some part-time hands. When we can afford them, we'll manage. They stood in silence, watching the horse. Finally, Eleanor spoke. Do you ever regret it? Staying here, choosing this life? Never. Even though it's hard? especially because it's hard. Easy things don't mean anything. Caleb looked at her. I spent 8 years running because running was easy. This is hard, and it's the best thing I've ever chosen. They walked back to the house as stars emerged, the same stars that had watched Sarah and Annie die, that had watched Daniel fall, that had watched Caleb drift through 40 towns and 8 years of emptiness. Now they watched two people choose each other, choose a ranch that needed more work than they could give, choose a future that promised struggle and uncertainty, but also promised something else, something worth the cost, purpose, partnership, home. In the morning, Miguel loaded his wagon, everything he owned, fit in one small space, 20 years reduced to a trunk and some tools. Eleanor hugged him goodbye. Visit every year, you promised I will, and you better. Still be here when I do. We will. He shook Caleb's hand. Take care of them, I will. And Caleb, Miguel's eyes were serious. Thank you for showing me it was okay to let go, to forgive myself, to move forward. You did that yourself. I just witnessed it. The wagon rolled away. Eleanor waved until it disappeared, then cried into Caleb's shoulder. For 20 minutes after, she wiped her eyes. We have work to do. Barn roof won't fix itself. They worked through the day. Caleb on the roof, Eleanor's organized supplies, both of them tired and sore and absolutely certain this was where they belonged as the sun set. Caleb rode Obsidian out to the south ridge, the place where Daniel had died, where everything had ended and in a strange way begun. He sat on the horse and looked at the valley spread below. Eleanor's ranch small from this height, the barn and house and corrals looking fragile against the vastness. They're solid, real. We made it, Caleb said, to Daniel's ghost, to Sarah and Annie's memory, to himself. We chose to try, and we made it. The horse shifted beneath him, patient, steady. Waiting, I know, Caleb said. I'm to go home. They rode back down. As darkness fell, Eleanor was waiting at the barn. She smiled when she saw them. Dinner's ready. I'll be right there. He unsaddled Obsidian, brushed him down, made sure he had feed and water. The horse watched him work with calm eyes. Thank you, Caleb said quietly, for choosing to trust me, for proving that broken things can heal, for showing me what courage looks like. Obsidian lowered his head. Let Caleb rest, forehead against the stallion's nose, just for a moment, just long enough to feel the warmth, the life, the connection that had saved them both. Then Caleb walked to the house, to Eleanor, to the life they'd built from broken pieces and stubborn hope. The door closed behind him. Light spilled from the windows. Smoke rose from the chimney. A ranch that struggled, a couple that had been shattered and chose to mend, a horse that remembered what trust felt like. Not perfect, not easy, not guaranteed to last, but real and chosen and fought for. And in the end, that was all. The valley held them as darkness fell. Three living things who'd learned the same lesson in different ways, that patience is its own kind of strength, that trust is a choice, not a guarantee, that choosing to believe in tomorrow, even when yesterday broke you, is the bravest thing any creature can do. They didn't get happily ever after. They got something better. They got to try. And sometimes trying is enough. Winter came to the valley, as it always did, hard and unforgiving, testing everything it touched. The barn roof leaked. Despite the repairs, the fences sagged under heavy snow. Money ran short. More than once, Eleanor had to choose between feed and firewood, between repairs and food. Morton's offer sat on the table like a devil's bargain, tempting every time. Money ran short, but they didn't take it. Caleb worked from dawn until dark, fixing what broke, building what needed building, learning the ranch the way a man learns his wife's, every detail mattering. Eleanor managed the books, made hard decisions about what could wait and what couldn't, sold cattle when necessary, bought only essentials, stretched every dollar until it screamed, and Obsidian, the black stallion who'd started it all, carried Caleb through the winter work, patient and steady, a partner in every sense. Some nights Eleanor would stand at the window and watch Caleb working in the barn by lamplight and wonder if she'd asked too much, if loving her meant condemning him to endless struggle. But then he'd come inside, cold and tired, and smile at her, and she'd know he'd chosen this, eyes open, knowing the cost. Some nights Caleb would lie beside Eleanor and think about Sarah and Annie, about the life he'd lost, and wonder if he deserved this second chance. But then Eleanor would reach for him in the dark, and he'd know deserving didn't matter, only choosing did. And every morning, when Caleb walked to the barn, Obsidian would be waiting at the stall door, ready to work, ready to trust, ready to face whatever the day brought, because that's what partners did. They showed up. They chose each other. Every single day spring came eventually, as it always did, slow and grudging. The snow melted in patches, grass pushed up, through mud, the creek ran high with snow melt, and the ranch still stood, battered but whole, struggling but surviving. Thomas visited monthly, brought supplies sometimes, worked alongside them, learning the land. His father had loved becoming the man. His father had been Patricia's remarried, he told them, one April afternoon, to a banker. In Missouri. I got the papers last week. How do you feel? Eleanor asked. Free, Thomas said. Finally free. The Mortons still watched, still waited, but they didn't push. Morton Sr. was patient. He could afford to be. Eleanor knew, he thought, time would break them, that eventually the struggle would become too much and they'd sell. But he didn't understand what kept them going. It wasn't stubbornness or pride or even love of the land. It was love of each other and the choice they made daily to keep trying. 2 years passed. The ranch didn't get easier, but they got stronger. Caleb learned every inch of the property, knew which fence posts rotted first, which water sources ran dry in summer where the cattle liked to graze. Eleanor learned to trust, not just Caleb, but herself, learned that asking for help wasn't weakness. That partnership meant sharing burdens, not carrying them alone. And Obsidian, the horse who'd brought them together, grew older, calmer, and more essential to everything they did. One evening, 3 years after the wedding, Caleb rode him to the South Ridge again, same place he'd gone that first time. The valley spread below, unchanged and eternal. Eleanor's ranch still small, still fragile looking, but still there. He thought about the question he'd asked himself that night, 3 years ago, whether broken things could truly heal. And he realized he'd been asking the wrong question all along. Broken things didn't heal. Back to what they were before they healed into. Something new, something different, something that carried the scars, but wasn't defined by them. Eleanor wasn't the woman she'd been before Daniel died. She was someone who'd survived loss and chosen love again. Caleb wasn't the man he'd been before Sarah and Annie. He was someone who'd learned that running didn't solve anything, that standing still took more courage. And Obsidian wasn't the horse he'd been before Daniel's fall. He was a creature who'd chosen trust after betrayal, who'd picked up a halter and carried it to someone who needed proof. They were all different now, changed by what they'd lost and what they'd found, but they were also whole in a way that mattered more than perfection. Caleb rode back down as the sun set. Eleanor was waiting at the barn like she always was. Good ride? She asked. Good ride. She helped him unsaddle. Obsidian working together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of partnership. When they finished, the horse stood between them, patient and calm. Let them both run hands down his neck, scratch behind his ears. 3 years, Eleanor said, since you walked into my valley. Best 3 years I've had, even with all the struggle, especially with all the struggle. Caleb looked at her. You taught me that fighting for something is better than running from everything. You taught me that trust is still possible. After everything breaks, they walked to the house together, Obsidian watching them go, then turning back to his hay, content in his stall. Inside they made dinner, ate by lamplight, talked about tomorrow's work, about the fence that needed fixing, the cattle that needed moving to summer pasture. Ordinary things, ordinary life, but there was ordinary about the choice they made every single day to stay, to fight, to keep trying. Outside the valley settled into night. Stars emerged, cold and distant. Wind whispered through the grass. The creek murmured its endless song, and in the barn a black stallion slept, dreaming horse dreams of running free and choosing to come back, of trust earned and trust given, trust honored of a man who'd been patient enough to wait for a broken thing to heal, and a woman who'd been brave enough to believe in second chances of a life built not on certainty, but on the courage to try. The stars watched, as they always had, as they always would, indifferent to human struggle, human hope, human love. But the three of them, woman, man, horse, they weren't looking at the stars, they were looking at each other, the life they'd built, at the choice they'd made, to trust, despite everything, to love after loss, to build on broken ground, and in that stubborn, relentless, daily choice, they found something the stars would never understand. They found home.